Thank you, Ollie, for that introduction. I hope I don't disappoint you. First off, I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out on such a lovely morning. A few months back, I got an email from Sean Ryan of the organising committee telling me about the festival, and he invited me to participate. And I was flattered by the invitation, so here I am. But as you can see, I'm very nervous, so I'm not used to speaking in public, so please be patient and try and tune in, because I know I speak very fast, especially when I'm nervous. As Ollie said, I write a column with the Farming Independent, and I'd previously been livestock editor with the paper for over a decade, which is actually the job that Joe Healy, the new president of the IFA, took over from me. Then I took a step back from journalism when our children were born, and they include Sarah, who's here with me today. Then in 2012, I realised that I'd like to dip my feet back into the writing water, as it were. And my husband, who's called Robin Talbot, he's a beef farmer in Ballycollock, County which is best known as the three-time location of the ploughing, which is partly on our land. Now, I know I'm kind of biased, but he's actually a pretty good farmer. And we would regularly have, Tom was talking about having groups of farmers and students and so on, and we would likewise have those, like people coming from meat buyers and students and farmers from home and abroad coming to the farm to visit. So I decided I'd chronicle what we were doing, and initially this was just going to be for ourselves, but it ended up being a book which is called A Year on Our Farm. Now, somebody asked me earlier, did I bring any copies? I didn't. I don't know if people would be interested, but there are lots of photos in it as well. So it was partly from my journalism background. There was a fair bit of writing, but there were photos which I just went out with my own camera and just took myself. So then after that was published, I was invited back to the Farming Independent to write an opinion piece. And I'm very fortunate in that I can write about pretty much what I like. So that could be anything from wellies to greenways, from ash dieback, or to the benefits of walking around the grass barefoot. And they are really benefits to walking around the grass barefoot. So what am I going to talk to you about today? There's a saying that you write about what you know. And so, as I've just said, I write about everything, which effectively means I know very little about anything. So all I really know is my own experience of the world. So what I've decided to talk about for the first time outside my own family is the unexpected death of our first child, who was a girl called Rachel, and she was stillborn at term 13 years ago. It's by far the worst thing that's ever happened to me. My world was shattered. It's such an unnatural event. Children should bury their parents, not the other way around. When I had met Robin, I was 35, and I'd pretty much given up on hope that I was ever going to meet that special one. But then I did, and we were married just over 2 years later. And I arrived back from our honeymoon pregnant, and it was a dream pregnancy right up to almost the very end. One morning when I was overdue, I thought I had a fever, and I said that to my consultant when I saw him later that day for a scheduled appointment. He checked me out and checked the baby out. Everything was fine. Then the next day, I popped into my GP because I was feeling a bit anxious. Her heartbeat was strong and steady, 160 beats a minute. The following day, I went back to the GP again, and for what I thought was going to be a routine affirmation that everything was okay, but her heart had stopped, just like that. The following weeks and months were worse than I could ever have imagined. I had suffered loss, as everybody has, in the past. My father, Pat, had died from diabetes when I was 5. My brother, Johnny, who was jockey in America, had died after an incident in a swimming pool when he was 24. And my mum, Rita, had died suddenly from an aneurysm when I was in my 20s. But on all those occasions, difficult as they were, I still felt I was holding something, a little bit of strength in reserve. But now I was bereft. One day, the thought entered my head, we could go out for a meal any day we like. The very next second, I felt I'd never want to set foot outside the door again. I'd lost my appetite for everything. Another day, I was in the supermarket and I accidentally wandered into the mother and baby aisle, which is stocked to the gills with nappies and talc and baby wipes, and I became so overwhelmed that I had to abandon the trolley and run out of the shop. I looked normal enough on the outside, but inside I was screaming. I struggled to make sense of what had happened. Sometimes, when Robin was going herding, I'd hop into the Jeep with him. I might look at a tree and think, that's a big thing, but how come it's so insignificant compared to a tiny baby? Or there's a house. Now that's a really big thing. So how come that is as nothing compared to a baby? I was very angry and bitter. At who? God or fate? I didn't know, and I still don't. In the hospital, we'd taken some photos of Rachel. They were the only ones we'd ever had. A few weeks later, I took the film into the local shop to get it developed, and I said to the lady, "Be very careful with that, it's irreplaceable." "Ooh," she said, "that sounds very ominous." And then, when I went to collect them afterwards, she was far more subdued, and that gave me a momentary twinge of something verging on satisfaction. I know my pain was nothing to do with her, but when you feel good about yourself, you want everyone to feel good, and when you feel bad, you begrudge everyone any happiness. But we were faced with a choice. We could have seen ourselves as victims, and we could blame, but what good would it have been to blame what had happened on anyone? So instead, we chose to focus on finding ways to express our pain and to find things that would help us to survive. So at first, we recognised we couldn't cope alone, and then we were lucky we found a good counsellor. And just a slight aside on this, one thing that strikes me is that bad and all as it was for us, at least our grief was seen as something that was somehow valid, whereas there are lots of other people who live all day, every day, go about their lives, and they have terrible hurts, and because they're not as visible, they may not be seen as having the same validity. Then very slowly I started to find small things that started to make it feel a bit better. I wrote down my thoughts and feelings. Some days it might have just been a word or two, other times it was reams of stuff. But I was often so distressed that I had no words. At those times, I sometimes found that doing physical stuff helped release the pressure. I often punched my pillow, and one day I nearly broke my toe when I kicked a wall so hard. A friend had a horse that I used to ride, and I walked. I was often in floods of tears as I walked, but at least I was doing something as well as crying. It was like a crock of, instead of gold, a crock of tears, and no matter how much I cried, it kept filling back up. I also did lots of painting, walls and fences, that is, rather than canvases. I got satisfaction from achieving something, and the tiredness took the edge off my emotions. I'd love to be able to paint creatively, but I just don't feel that connection. That's what worked for me. Something else entirely might work for somebody else. And I found that the gaps between the tears did widen, and where I had only been seeing clouds, I started to see the sun again. And at one stage I came up with an image for the future, and just as Tom was talking about hay barns, for me it was something similar in a sense. I felt that our life was like a hay barn, and it was packed to the rafters with our loss. And I felt that the loss was not going to diminish in size, so what we instead needed to do was to extend the shed and find new things to put into it. And then 3 months after Rachel died, a little miracle happened. I became pregnant again with Sarah, and she was and still is the light of our lives. And 3.5 years later, when I was 43, she was joined by Ruth. Now, I'm not religious in the traditional sense, but I am spiritual, and I do believe that the spirit or soul of Rachel is out there somewhere, looking out for all our family, Sarah and Ruth and Robin and myself. Each one of us is the product of what we experience and how we deal with it. For our family, we will always be one short, but I see us as more blessed than not. I am happy and I feel lucky. So why am I speaking to you here today about this? Honestly, I suppose it's because I feel enough time has passed that I'm able to. Also because I want our child to be remembered, and I want people to speak her name and be okay with me if I burst into tears. But it's also, I suppose, to all of us as a reminder to look out for others. There are times we all get caught up in our own world, and we may fail to see when others about us are in pain. Perhaps they're ashamed or afraid to ask for help, or perhaps they don't know how to go about it. I was lucky in having the support of Robin, my brother Ger and sister Rose, and a small number of good friends who loved me for simply being me, and they showed me their love by their actions. We are all, us here and beyond these walls, sharing the same journey, and we will all, at different times, hopefully, end up in the same destination. What matters is the journey itself, what we do on it. There's great potential for joy and happiness, but we are also never finished with challenges and grief. Until, that is, I suppose, we pass on ourselves, and then hopefully somebody will grieve for us, but not too much. On my departing now, but just from this the podium, I hope, I want to leave you with some words from Helen Steiner Rice. Trouble is something no one can escape. Everyone has it in some form or shape. Some people hide it way down deep inside. Some people bear it with gallant-like pride. Some people worry and complain of their lot. Some people covet what they haven't got. So blessed are the people who learn to accept the trouble men try to escape and reject. For in accordance we're given great grace, and courage and faith and strength to face the daily troubles that come to us all, so we may learn to stand straight and tall. For the grandeur of life is born of defeat, for in overcoming we make life complete.